So tonight, so for those of us who studied with Rabbi Joel on Wednesday, I have to be honest, as we were studying, he took, and I shared a lot of the material that I had prepared for tonight about miracles. That being said, Gloria sent me an article yesterday or 2 days ago. I don't even know when, yesterday, and I'll share it with everybody in a little while. But it was an article in the New York Times about finding goodness, finding light, and the rituals around finding light are not unique to Judaism, but that there is a long history of finding light amidst darkness. And then I was thinking about how tonight is the 21st and how it's the winter solstice, and we're just on the back end of Hanukkah, and thinking about all of these different things. So I wanted to bring a couple of different texts together, and I have faith that together we will link them in some way to some magical, mystical teaching. So instead of doing full miracles, we're gonna dive a little bit into the darkness thing, or in the hopes that we're gonna bring forth light. And we were talking this morning about how we're rounding the corner almost remarkably to a full Jewish year cycle on Zoom pretty soon. Not till the end of February, but we have Tu B'Shvat, which we will do. And Purim. The last time Purim was when many of us were in the sanctuary. And so then we're going to return again to Passover, but we keep moving. And so we keep finding different ways, and there's new light, I think, that we bring forth into each of these things. So this is what I want to do. I want to explore a couple of texts and see where it takes us. I have 3 texts tonight, a midrash, a psalm, and actually a teaching by the Lubavitcher Rabbi. So we're gonna pull them all together. All right. So we're gonna try to do this. So here we go. Hold on, I need to open it up. Okay. All right. Here we go. So let us, I'll say the bracha for studying Torah. If you want to join with me, please do so. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. All right, so here is a text by Howard. I saw you giving me an eye that it was too small, so I made it bigger. So here's a text by the Sfat Emet, and I'm saying it's midrash because it's a homily about light in Hanukkah. And so here we go. The Rokeach, who is another commentator on the Torah, says that the 36 candles on Hanukkah, what are the 36 candles on Hanukkah? 1, then the next night is 2, and then the next night is 3. You add them all up, it's 36 without the shamash. It says that the 36 candles on Hanukkah, full transparency, I used a calculator today to make sure that was right. Nevertheless, it turns out it is. Hold on 1 second, now I can see you all. Okay, so the Rokeach says that the 36 candles on Hanukkah correspond to the 36 hours that the hidden light illuminated the world at the beginning of creation. Does anybody know what the hidden light is that was at the beginning of creation? I can't see you all, but does anybody have an idea of what that might be? Yeah, Nancy?
Well, before God separated the light from the dark, so before there was light, there actually was light, it just couldn't see it, it was hidden. That would be my guess. I don't know if that's right.
Yeah, so there was this hidden light. There was, yes, as you said, there was light before creation, and then it was formed, right, into the luminaries that we have in the sky. And there was this hidden light, as Nancy described. Now, what's the 36 hours? This hidden light was illuminating the world for 36 hours after, well, it's told that after Adam and Eve were created, before the sin. Okay, so according to Midrash, there are 36 hours between those two things happening. Let's just kind of go with that. All right, here we go. So the 36 candles on the Chanukiah correspond to the 36 hours that of the hidden light which illuminated the world at the beginning of creation. We see that the Hanukkah candles are from the hidden light which illuminates in the darkness. This is what the Talmud means, that the hidden light would illuminate from one end of the world to the other, meaning that there is nothing hidden from this light. For the world is called nature because of it, called nature because it hides ma'alim, which is a play on the word light, the light. I'm going to read that again. This is what the Talmud teaches. The hidden light would illuminate from one end of the world to the other. Now, we have to imagine that the perception here by this Rokeach, I have to look up when the Rokeach was teaching, is what? Bruce, you're shaking your head?
No, I'm just guessing. Where does God hide light? God hides light in the Torah, right?
Okay, so yes, we'll get there.
Okay.
But I thought you were laughing about the other thing. From one end of the world to the other, I think he assumed that the world was flat at this point, okay? Right, so that this hidden light has enough power to illuminate from each end, and that if the world, according to him, was flat, and if the light was all-encompassing, that there would be nothing hidden from it, right? For the world is called nature because it hides the olam. I have to figure that piece out, but we're going to unpack it together. But that hidden light allows one to see everything that is hidden and was stored away for the righteous. At the time of Hanukkah, the generation was walking in the dark. But the Jews in that generation, sacrificed their lives and served God even in the darkness. And therefore they merited to experience the hidden light. And a remnant of this light is seen on Hanukkah every year. And every person who does the work of God should rejoice on these days in account of this hidden light. All right, so I don't want to unpack each thing. I don't want to get hung up on each piece. But what generally are some of the themes that this is teaching us? I'm going to leave it up there for just a minute. Either A, what do these Hanukkah lights represent? Or B, what are we seeing in the dark?
I'll give it a
Nancy.
shot.
Yeah, go ahead. Wait, I don't know who said that.
Oh,
Ronnie, please, Ronnie, yes, thank you.
So I'm wondering if it's talking about how we get lost in contemporary life and that we lose sight of the things that bring us up, that raise us up, that bring us closer to Hashem, to the Lord.
Yeah, I think I definitely see that. And there's also a play on the word ma'alim, right? Which means sort of illuminating upwards. So like it has the same language of rising up or going up. And I think, yes, certainly. I hear that and see that in here. Other thoughts? Yeah, Nancy.
So I was thinking that maybe there's some implication that during Hanukkah, when we concentrate on the light, we have an opportunity to see what is usually hidden from us, because we may not be considered of the righteous, but in Hanukkah, we're allowed to get a glimpse of that. Now, I don't know whether or not that's supposed to make us use righteousness as a higher goal so that we can see the light more or not, but there's something implied that there's this limited amount of time in which we are allowed to see the light that we're not allowed to at other times.
Beautiful. I wanna have a conversation around that for a second. Thank you, Nancy, for saying that. What does anybody want to build or respond to Nancy or think about that? Deborah.
It seems to me that the normal light that we see in our daily world will often cause shadows based on things, you know, that hide it or block it or whatever in our world. But that the special light of Hanukkah is kind of this hidden light which can permeate everything and erase the shadows and allow us to see more clearly inside ourselves, up to God. It's just a different kind of light that allows us to rise up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if God hid if God hid the darkness in the Torah, okay, and the Torah is often referred to as the black fire and the white fire. Without the black fire, without the darkness, there is no Torah.
Just to clarify a little bit for those who don't know what Bruce is speaking about, there's a famous teaching talking about the ink and the parchment on the Torah. So the black and the white. Say that last piece again that you just said, if you can.
You know, I'm just thinking about when God hides the darkness, where does the darkness go?
Where does it go?
Yeah, where does the darkness go? And the Torah is composed of this darkness and this light. And neither can be revealed without the other. And it is the darkness actually in the Torah that we see. The hidden light, the white light of the Torah is the harder light to see.
Mm-hmm. Ironically, they also use the language of fire, white fire and dark fire, which we could tease that out too. But yeah, great. Thank you for bringing that forward. Carol. Wait, hold on. No, try again.
Thanks. I want to go back to Nancy's idea for a minute of light. So two things occurred to me. One is that recent book, maybe not so recent, All the Light We Cannot See. Our hearts have to be open and our minds have to be open in order to see whether it's light or it's dark. And sometimes the sun is so bright, it's harder to see in the light than it is to see when there's not so much light. And the other one is the middle of the word enlightened or enlighten is light. And light to me always connotes warmth and intelligence and being able to learn and maybe a little bit of safety. And I think all of that light is bundled up in being enlightened if we allow ourselves the opportunity to see in the light or the darkness.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you. Other thoughts? I'm going to pull it back up. There's this idea here at the end, right? This piece, okay, right here. The time of Hanukkah, the generation there, right? If we think about the people who had been assimilated, right? Those who the Maccabees were fighting against, right? That generation was walking in the dark, right? But then it says, but the Jews in that generation sacrificed their lives. Now, I presume he's talking here about the Maccabees, and served God even in the darkness, right? They served God even when it wasn't clear why or how. And therefore they merited to experience the hidden light. And then the remnant of this light is what we see on Hanukkah. Now, what's interesting to me is these lights we don't like snap our fingers and they appear, right? We are the ones who are actively illuminating this light and putting it out there in the world. Now, the question is what kind of light are we putting out into the world? I think it is to me sort of the philosophical question here. Are we bringing forth the light that was in creation, or are we bringing forth the light that Ronnie was talking about up front? The light, the noise, the chaos, right? Interesting here. Has anybody, in Hebrew, 36 is Lamed Vav.
Yeah, Lamed Vav mix.
There's a teaching that there's 36 righteous people in the world. There's always 36 righteous people in the world. We don't know who they are. They could be our neighbor. They could be somebody on the street, but we should always act as if one of those people that we're encountering is one of the 36 righteous people in the world. It's just interesting that there's a strong connection there in terms of how we're playing with this. Other thoughts about this text before we move on? Susan, please.
Does the 36 have anything to do with double chai and life?
Certainly you can make a beautiful midrash about that. Right? What is the essence of what is sustaining us? You're doubling up on the, on Hanukkah, you're doubling the life force, I suppose, in some way. But to me, what's really interesting here, and of course, you guys, you're not new to studying with me, is that who's responsible for bringing that light is that we're responsible for bringing that light. So the question is how do we activate it, right? I think that what we have then within us is if we have the possibility to touch, to hold, to illuminate this primordial light, right, which we go searching for all the time, right? That might be some of our life's goal, to search the world for this primordial light, to bring all these sparks of light into the world, into this vessel, which we're going to hold and allow to share with the world. That we have the capacity to have that within us all the time. But our intention then is a big part of it. Nancy, go ahead.
I wanted to go back to what you said a few minutes ago about without darkness, there would be no Torah, because there's black on white and white on black. And that what illuminates the dark or darkens the light is words. And we have to keep in mind that God spoke the world into existence. So that's another tool for us to bring about this light that you're talking about for us and for others, is by using our word. And maybe the key is finding those words in Torah study or wherever we find them. We have that in our power to bring light by using words, same way that God used light to bring creation.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Bruce.
Well,
Bruce and then Susan.
As usual, Nancy Wolk, you are just, I love studying with you. Because this idea of light, it's easy. The automatic thought about light is that it's sunlight or starlight or moonlight. But the light that comes from the words that Nancy's talking about, I think is what is meant by this primordial light. It's not a light of the eyes, not a light of the eyes at all. And darkness isn't a darkness that is the absence of sunlight or moonlight or starlight.
Great, thank you. Deb, did you want to respond directly to that? Well, and then I know, Susan, you were raising your hand.
Well, let Susan go first. She was raising her hand.
Uh-huh.
Well, to just respond to something, Bruce, that you just said, I think light is also the light that's in our heart.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, what I was thinking listening to this conversation is that this last year has been very dark. And it's been dark for many, many people. And I heard something today on the news that admissions to law school and medical school applications are at an unprecedented level. I forget what the statistics are. But the point being that even in this darkness, you have young people who want to create light, who want to bring light forward by, you know, becoming lawyers after seeing how the law has been denigrated over the last 4 years, or by becoming doctors, by seeing the heroes amongst us, and how they've put their lives on the lines every day. And that to me is bringing light forward when these young people say, you know, I want to stand for something. I want to do something in this world. And I just thought those statistics were really hopeful.
Yeah. Thank you. Deb.
I love what everyone has been saying. I mean, it's really beautiful in the connection with the different kinds of light. My only hesitation with all of this is that having that linked to the Maccabees somehow to me just doesn't jive because of the zealousness of the Maccabees and the Hasmoneans that came afterwards. And I think we kind of have to divorce it from that and think about it more in the metaphorical, beautiful terms that we've been all talking about, because that zealotry is just very dangerous.
Absolutely, it's definitely where the rabbi Irving. I see your hand. 1 second. I see where the rabbis ended up in the Talmud too, because they grappled with that exact challenge. I think that you've just articulated. So, ending up with which is how we end up with the miracle of the oil. So Irving and then Karen.
Well, I could talk about a different kind of light related to scientific research. We just look contemporarily.
Mm-hmm.
We have a pandemic. Somebody figured out the structure of the virus. That's shining a light in its structure. And then from that, they were able to figure out how to create a vaccine. And so that's a different kind of light of scientific research, illuminating how things work, how they're built, and, you know, giving tremendous insights into many, many different phenomena, including ways of making medicines to combat the virus.
Absolutely.
So it's a different way of thinking about it.
And actually, our third text, I think you'll see the most connection to that notion. So yes, thank you for saying that, Karen.
I apologize because I know some people were on the other night when we were studying with both you and Joel. But if I got this right, he mentioned that, all right, so there were the swords, and that the relationship to light didn't actually come until 600 years after the Maccabees. I apologize because I don't know enough about history to know why was that then added at that point. And that is more the source of where the light came, because that's where the reference, if I understood what was being said the other night, that's where the light reference and the lighting of the candles and the oil reference actually came into being.
Right. So between the story of Judah Maccabee and the codification of the Talmud, there's somewhere between, let's just say roughly 600 years. In between that time, after the destruction of the Second Temple, the Pharisees and the rabbinic tradition that was born out of that sect of Judaism were trying to figure out how to sustain a tradition outside of temple worship, and that was centered around temple worship, and that was not built on nationhood, that was on sovereignty, because there was no sovereignty at the time. And so they in part had to address this narrative that people knew about, and they had this rededication ritual, and that was very much a part of a narrative in the book of Maccabees, but wasn't a part of the Jewish canon. And they determined that there was a different teaching and a different message that they wanted to, a spiritual message rather than a military message, to get out of it.
So there was no direct engagement that said, okay, we want to make this light. They were just, they thought light would make it more spiritual, which goes back to a lot of what everybody.
Well, there still was a menorah, and there still was candles, and there still was something, but in terms of the miracle of Hanukkah that we talk about, that would be separate. Deb, go ahead.
Well, also it was the time of terrible Roman occupation and persecution. And so the last thing that the rabbis wanted to do in developing the new rituals after the temple was destroyed was to highlight a military victory over an ruling power, which was what the story of the Maccabees was to the Greek, Assyrian Greeks. So they wanted a different kind of story than a military victory. And they created the story of the oil to make it more related to God and spiritual nature and things like that.
Yes. All right. So we're going to hop back into the text. So going back to the light and the dark, I want to bring us to Psalm 139. Okay. And this is just the first 12 verses of this psalm. It is not the entirety of it. For what it's worth, I don't love this translation, but this is what was on Safaria this morning. And so this is what we're going to work with. For the leader of David, a psalm. O Lord, you have examined me and know me. When I sit down or stand up, you know it. You discern my thoughts from afar. You observe my walking and reclining and are familiar with all my ways. There's not a word on my tongue, but that you, O Lord, know it well. Right? Who's watching? You hedge me before and behind. You lay your hand upon me. It is beyond my knowledge. It is a mystery. I cannot fathom it. Where can I escape from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I ascend to Sheol, the pits of despair, you are there too. If I take wing with the dawn to come to rest on the western horizon, even there your hand will be guiding me. Your right hand will be holding me fast. Here we go. If I say, surely darkness will conceal me, night will provide me with cover. Darkness is not dark for you. Night is as light as day. Darkness and light are the same. So what is this psalm? King David writing this psalm to God. What is he reflecting on, specifically in the last part? Based on, I mean, you have to read the first part, the context of the first part of the psalm in order to fully be able to unpack this part. But what is he saying here? About light and dark, about our role, God's role.
Yeah.
How are the light, Ronnie? Yeah, go ahead.
I think David was a very complex character who had
Sure.
done a variety of things
Sure.
that were, some were public and some were hidden.
And some were good and some were very bad.
So good, actually bad. And so it feels to me like this is a confessional, that this is a statement of his coming to terms with the fact that he may have gotten away with some of his acts in a public way, but he cannot hide from God.
Certainly, if we're taking the context of King David, yeah, spot on. Absolutely. What I'm looking to see here is what is the spiritual meaning of being in the dark and having God with us, that night can provide us with cover, which seems to be here a positive thing, and that night is as light as day, darkness and light are the same. How does this add to our notion that we were talking about before, about this hidden light and revealed light? Ronnie, thank you. Why is darkness not dark for God? I'm going to pull this back. Why is darkness not dark for God? Al or Judy? I can't tell whose hand that is.
It's somebody's. We got four. It's God not only created the world, but he knows everything in it. Nothing escapes his vision, whether it's dark or light. He's present at everything, everywhere, all the time. So you can't possibly avoid his knowing.
Why would God need light to see?
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, great, thank you. Carol and then Nancy.
Nancy, do you want to go first? Okay. So a couple of things come to mind. One is that we put the blood from the Paschal Lamb on the lintel of the doorpost at night, and that was protecting us in the darkness as the angel of death went over. Passover is only a few months away at this point. But also linking to Passover, night and day and day and night, they're all the same. We, that passage, I think we talked about it last time, the passage about we include the nights because they're part of the days. The day is 24 hours. And, today, as we're talking about Saturn and Jupiter being lined up in this crazy world that we live in, it is dark here, but it's morning somewhere else. So God sees because there's a whole. Day and night, light and darkness, both of them make up a whole. So if we're looking for shalom, we also need shalom. We need wholeness, we need fullness, we need, getting back to Bruce's comment, the black and the white in Torah in order to show us the way.
Great, beautiful, thank you. Thank you, Carol. Nancy.
I was just going to add that what I got from that is that, from that psalm, is that God doesn't need darkness. We need darkness. We need respite. We need to be able to hide sometimes, to get out of the light, to feel okay, various reasons, but that's the difference. One of the differences between God and human beings. God doesn't need darkness.
And then the core text that we studied last time is we don't see the light unless we're within the dark, or a text, right? You can't see light within light. It all blends together, but we can see that in the dark. Let's keep going. Deborah, and then if there are other voices I'd love to bring in.
Also, I think we have to not only think of God as other and out there, but God is also within us. We have a divine spark and a piece of God within each of us. And so we can't hide necessarily in the darkness from that piece of God within us. And that, so it's the same in lightness and in dark, and we have to acknowledge that and not hide from ourselves. And the needs for change or whatever that are within us.
Beautiful. Any other thoughts? Otherwise, I'm going to bring in this last text. So I'm going to bring this last text with the caveat that let's just move past the fact that we think we know what the Lubavitcher Rebbe's end goal is. And that is that everybody should be doing mitzvot, okay? Or that we should have a bunch of people helping other people do mitzvot, okay? Let's just like allow that to live in the world that we understand and see what we can glean about if we know that there's hidden light to be revealed in the world, and we know that God holds both light and dark, and we know that we're created in the divine image, and we know that we have this light within us, right? If we have all those layers, right, we have the capacity to bring forth the light when we light candles. So we're bringing forth that creation light. Why are we bringing forth that created light? Because we're created in the divine image, right? That we have that capacity within us. So then we'll see what happens here. And then I'm going to share that, Gloria, I'll share that piece that you shared with me because I thought it was so beautiful. Okay. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe, does somebody else want to read?
I can read.
Great, thanks, Danny.
My father-in-law reported this conversation with his own father, Rebbe Sholem Dov Ber, then the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The chassid asked, Rebbe, what is a chassid? The Rebbe answered, a chassid is a street lamp lighter. In olden days, there was a person in every town who would light the gas street lamps with a light he carried at the end of a long pole. On the street corners, the lamps were there in readiness, waiting to be lit. A street lamp lighter has a pole with fire. He knows that the fire is not his own, and he goes around lighting all the lamps on his route. Today, the lamps are there, but they need to be lit. It is written, the soul of man is a lamp of God, and it is also written, a mitzvah is a lamp, and the Torah is light. A chassid is one who puts personal affairs aside and goes around lighting up the souls of Jews with the light of Torah and mitzvot. Jewish souls are in readiness to be lit. Sometimes they are around the corner. Sometimes they are in a wilderness or at sea. But there must be someone who disregards personal comforts and conveniences and goes out to ignite these lamps with his or her flame. That is the function of a true chassid.
Okay, thank you, Danny. Like I said, let's just move past what we think and assume the takeaway is here. But what is the spiritual message that we can glean from this? Who can be a lamplighter?
Anyone.
Anyone. And then, is that true? Anybody can be the lamplighter?
I was wondering if you were going back to the Tzadikim Nistarim, the Lamed Vavniks.
Oh, I wasn't planning to, but let's go there if you want.
I went there.
Okay. I don't know. Let's hold that for a second.
Anyone can be a lamplighter if he takes the light of God. Flame is the light that God has given.
So then the question is where does that light exist? Because the lamplighter has the fire. So where does that fire originate? If anybody can do it, where do you start it? Where's the match?
It is within us. We are all God's creation. And so God has created that light within us, and we have the ability to use it.
And then is it most important that we need to share this light? I guess from these texts, in the dark, right? That it seems to be, we seem to need it more when there's darkness around us, right? Now, this isn't like, yeah, Carol, go ahead.
So by extension, when we light the Shabbos candles or the Hanukkah, we're actually not lighting the candles with a match. We're actually extending our arm. And that spark from within us is simply traveling through the match to light the candles to create more light in the world. And that's only one variation of light, because light is sharing things with each other and helping each other see. But it just occurred to me, it's a new way to think about lighting candles on a holiday, that it's coming from within us, not the match.
It almost makes me want to actually have a third candle, like on Hanukkah. You know, you're actually moving the flame itself, more closely connected to this text, and it feels more like it's an extension of you rather than something that you've created. That being said, I do think there's something beautiful about a spark, because the spark then comes from your action, right? It is the things that we do in the world that bring forth and ignite this light, whether it's the light of the lamplighter, whether it's the light in the darkness from the psalm, or whether it's the light, you know, that is this hidden light that's in different places in the world. You know, this is our work right now. It could be our work all the time, but it's especially our work right now. Nancy, go ahead.
So it seems a little crazy to say this, because it seems like we would know when it was dark. But sometimes I think that's the first step. We need to know it's dark in order to know that it's time to bring out our light and change.
Which makes it doubly hard, because
Pardon?
if you can't see the dark, you're within dark, right? You might need somebody else to help you get there too.
That's true, but maybe you need to go that step where, you know, if I can't see, then it must be dark. What can I do to illuminate the dark?
And where else can I bring forth that light? Absolutely. Yeah, Karen.
I was just going to say, I mean,
Danny.
people who live with depression or anxiety or are really ill, you know, when you're really sick, you're not aware of the days changing, or when you're really depressed, it's like you're not aware of how much darkness is within you. And a lot of times, I mean, you need to find it within yourself, but somebody needs to spark that energy, that life source within us, to help us know that we can be let out of the dark. Because I think a lot of people that suffer with anxiety and depression and bipolar disorder and any other, I mean, a lot of times they don't realize that they're in an alternate place.
Yeah.
It's not literally about the literal night and day, or that darkness, the lights are all out and then you turn them on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. Judy.
What's interesting to me is we've actually been living in the dark since last April or March, essentially. Okay, we've been living in what we would call a dark time, and people constantly refer to that. And the things that bring light to us now are things which seems to mitigate the issues for us that we're living with. So that's why people cheer the people who are medical people, because of course they are helping to damp the darkness and create more light for those people who are suffering, but also for the rest of us, because then we say, but it isn't just completely over. There's somebody who's going to be able to take care of us. And I think the idea of the vaccine is also a light. That is, we say, there's going to be an end. It isn't here now, but we can see that it's going to come, which adds light to how we view the world, I think.
Yeah. Other thoughts? Danny, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I like all of everything that people have been saying. And Karen's view is kind of internal, and Judy's view is kind of collective. And I guess what I'm thinking about is something that's more relational, more one-to-one, which is you could look at this parable, at this midrash, as being not about physical light and like lighting the candle within someone else, but rather that the light itself is something that's created as the lamplighter reaches out to the other individual. So the light that's created is not the spark within, but the spark between the two, and that's the moment of light. And so it's only there, I think, in this like kind of understanding, it's only there in that moment of connection. So it doesn't exist without two people.
And you need the second person because the gas obviously was, there has to be something to ignite it, right?
Like this is, sort of that Buber idea of, sort of, all real living is meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Gloria. Oh, you're muted.
I want to pick up on what Judy said about the pandemic. And Philip, is there any way for you to send this article to everybody?
I'm going to put it in the chat box. I'll do it right now.
Okay. It's just very important, written by a reporter.
It's actually interactive online too. I don't know if you saw
I haven't.
The online version. There's videos.
I urge you all to read this. Winter descends, a dark, bitter echo of our past. But Judy, so what I've been just listening since we started talking at 8 o'clock about light and dark and Hanukkah, and I'm thinking, why is it Hanukkah? And it all comes back in this is just my view, that there were these things like winter and pagan rituals came about, and then to cope with it. And then out of that came different forms for people to worship, to inspire themselves to be hopeful and say, we're going to get through this winter. And let's say the first winter, no one even knows there's another one coming. But the thing about this pandemic, that it hasn't been dark. Clearly what I say doesn't apply to everybody. People have really suffered. But for other people, we have taken the darkness, meaning the pandemic, and being shut in, especially if we're older, or shut in with our little kids. And we have created these incredible inventions like Zoom. I mean, Zoom wasn't invented because of the pandemic, but who here heard of it before? So in a way, it's brought us closer. There are all these things that are happening, people calling other people, and I don't want to go through the list, you all know it. So I don't want another pandemic. I want this to end like tomorrow or even in 15 minutes, but we have to wait. So it's really, it's the human spirit. It's not what some being or something from without tells us. We just say, we get up and we say, and again, barring medical conditions, psychiatric illnesses, mental health issues. We all know people who suffer from depression and cannot see the light. But again, it's like we are human and we find ways to go on. And there's nothing else to say. Yeah. I'm not Pollyanna. I think that, and I say thank you to everybody who has just kept their heads high and pushed on. Some have helped me, like these classes. I mean, it's just.
Well, thank you for saying that. Certainly everybody should take a look, if you can, take a look at that link. That is the article that Gloria is speaking of. It truly is a beautiful thing. And also we are very much in line with the great civilization of the modern civilization of people in this world who have needed to find light in dark times. And Judaism is not unique in that regard. And yet I think that our at least these 3 texts have given me a lot of meaning and purpose for ways that we can see that light, both activating it ourselves and bringing it forth in other people, in the hopes that we can continue to do the things that we need to do in order to sustain ourselves amidst the dark times. And so I think that that's a good place to end right now and say good night to Hanukkah. And yet there was a bar mitzvah. I officiated 3 bar mitzvah services on Shabbat, and they were all beautiful in their own way. And I was thinking halfway through the second one how cool it was to become bar mitzvah on the day after Hanukkah, because you have all this light, and then what do you do with it? It's all gone, just gone, right? The day after Hanukkah, the light is just gone. Right. So you have to find ways to keep it going, to sustain it, to keep teaching and keep doing good and connecting with that which is truly important in our lives. And I think that we're all trying to do it in our own ways. And I fully believe that our community at least has helped sustain me, and I know many of you in lots of ways as well. So I wish you all goodness, and that tomorrow we get a little bit more of it than we had today, even if it's like 30 seconds. But what did you say, Sue?
Can I make 2 announcements?
Yeah, and then I'm going to make one, and then we can say goodnight, please.
The first announcement is tomorrow during Lunch and Learn, Laura Rosenthal, our amazing communications person, and Emily Kozinski, our amazing operations and facilities manager, are going to do a little website Zoom 101 class. So if any of you need a little additional help or want to know the difference between a registration link and a Zoom link and all that other stuff, I urge you to register and go on and listen to them tomorrow. It'll be awesome. And the second little piece of information, which you've probably seen, is Friday night after services in true TBE fashion, we will have onegs and Chinese food. You're all on your own for the Chinese food because I cannot work easily with the Chinese restaurant. I'm sorry to say that. But it would be great if you stayed on services and we sort of break out into rooms and schmooze about light and darkness and light soy sauce, dark, all fun. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Susan. Thank you for the pun. So on Wednesday, please look for an email from me with all of our offerings that we're going to be beginning in January, even the very first week in January. So it's going to come very soon. There are lots of different and interesting classes. We're offering something called Hebrew in a Hurry, which is 4 weeks of really basic Hebrew if you want to tap into that. Ryan, our rabbinic intern, is teaching a class on social justice. I'm going to be beginning a class on an introduction, but introduction to the Jewish bookshelf. So looking at all sorts of different texts, what they are, what the history of them is, and why they're there and how they can bring meaning to our lives. Rabbi Sistenwein is teaching. There's a new class on Zionism and the psychology of it. There's lots of stuff going on. So please take a look at, and T-Bell, of course, please take a look at that email and share it broadly, because these connections are really important. And I will work on starting classes at 7:30. So for me too. So I will see you all very soon. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Night.
Good night.
Night.